Okay, well, I'm the moderator, so welcome to this special panel on COVID set safety. I'm Professor Joe Kramer. I teach film production classes in the EMF department. I'm excited because we're hosting two classes that normally run at this time, which is directing for film and video and acting for the camera. But we're also welcoming other folks from the department, students, hopefully. And I'm really excited for this because, we're still trying to find out, we're still trying to problem solve what a film production looks like in the COVID era. And it's something we're all wrestling with. I think it has, it's enormous consequences for the industry because, in spite of all the talk about fixes, we're going to be dealing with this and its aftershocks for what I think is a long time to come. Even once we've got the medical solutions to the problem, there's still going to be thoughts in the back of folks' heads as we deal with large crowds, gatherings, things that film shoots really run on. So anyway, I want to thank the team for joining us to talk about an experience doing this really at the forefront of while this is still going on, how to run a film set amidst a pandemic. And it has huge consequences for our film department and for theater departments. So anyway, I've said enough. So maybe what we can do is we can go around and if Lincoln, if you are working, we'll start with you. Otherwise, we'll put on you at the end.
Can you hear me any better now?
Yeah, you're coming through.
Okay, great, awesome. You said just introduction?
Yeah, say your name, what role you did on the film, and then we'll come back to you to hear more about the idea of your film and stuff. So
yeah. So my name's Lincoln Robish. I was the writer and director of Monochromacy, and I'm a senior in Towson's EMF program.
Cool. Thank you, Lincoln. Let's go to Natalie.
Hi, I'm Natalie, and I was the co-producer and editor, and I just recently graduated from Towson.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Natalie. How about you, Patrick? Let's go to you.
Yeah, I'm Patrick Mcallister. I'm the other co-producer, and I'm also a recent Towson grad.
Cool. Thank you. And okay, let's go to Sage next. Hi.
Hi, I'm Sage Larson. I'm a not as recent Towson grad, but still kind of recent. I work here in the Cage. I also work at Charm Cine, and I've been a producer and co-director on a couple short films.
And how about you, Isabelle?
Hi, my name is Isabelle Macker. I actually also just graduated from Towson. I work here in the Cage, and I also freelance for Studio Unknown, which is a post-production audio facility here in Baltimore. And then I also run production sound on set as well.
Great. So we have two alumni. We have multiple alumni, but Sage and Isabelle are there kind of as representatives of the Cage from a student point of view and alum point of view. Mark, how about you? Can we hear from you?
Hey everyone, I'm Mark Burchiek. I'm the multimedia technician for the department. And I also help to manage the Cage, and Travis and I have been working on all of the COVID set safety sort of initiatives that we're helping to implement this semester alongside all of our wonderful faculty, and relying on guidance from the CDC and relying on guidance from everything from industry resources and from the school. So this is just part of that initiative to try and get more information in front of our students. For those who haven't seen it previously, we had Caprice Erickson, who's a location manager, who gave an excellent set safety talk, which is now uploaded to our YouTube. And we'll plan to record this session and have it available online as well. So we wanted to invite all of these guests in because Lincoln will elaborate on it, but over the summer, they worked on what seemed to be a really well planned out short film that had a very elaborate COVID safety plan. I want to turn it back over to Joe. I don't know if there's any more setup you want to offer there.
Let's get Travis, do you mind just introducing yourself, and you'll be our final
Sorry, thank
introduce.
you.
Hi, everybody. Travis, I'm the Media Lab supervisor. I don't know what my job title is. Basically, everything that Mark just said. There's no reason for me to keep talking since it'll just be repetitive.
Cool, thank you. Okay, so we're going to talk about kind of an interesting case study, which is the particular group of students making a short film, but this is also a more broad conversation. So for those of you students, you can use the chat window. Why don't you use the raise hand function, and just please don't unmute yourself until you've kind of had it. In case anybody's talking, maybe the raised hand is the way to go, or to use the chat, and we can repeat those to everybody. So Lincoln, why don't you tell us? Oh, he's there. It's a technical difficulty. Do you need a moment, Lincoln? Maybe you do.
1 minute. I'm so sorry. That was a very.
You get there.
So sorry. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, you're coming.
Okay. I'm sorry. My computer rapidly lost battery and died there, and I got back on my phone, and now I'm back on my computer. So
Okay.
sorry about that.
No worries. Okay, we're on track here. So Lincoln, I was driving through Western Maryland, and I saw on a road sign on, I think, 70 Monochromacy. I don't know if I'm saying this right. I'm not from this area, so that jumped out to me because I was familiar with your film. And so do you mind just telling us a little bit about what this film is? What's it about? Let's just start there. What's the story of your film?
Sure. Yeah, so Monochromacy is a short film that is about a teen with undiagnosed Asperger's who is super into Civil War reenactments, and it's about his struggle to maintain a friendship with his reenacting buddy as she starts going to the same rural high school with him. So yeah, it's more a drama than anything else, but there's definitely some comedy in it. And yeah, so that's kind of the brief, log line synopsis. Yeah.
Okay, so I'm just curious, did you write this thing did you have this in mind prior to COVID?
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about, the genesis of the idea, and then did you in any way weave COVID considerations into your writing or your revisions of the writing?
Yeah, I can definitely talk about that. So I've had this idea in my head in one form or another for a very long time. I've had the core of this idea in my head for about 3 years, shortly after I left high school. So obviously the idea originally had zero COVID in it because COVID was, not even in worst nightmares of idea of what the world would be like. And so that was the idea came a long time ago. And then we actually started pre-production probably in right in the winter. Around December is when Natalie, Patrick, and I really started talking and started to get the balls rolling. And there was the first, half a year, the majority of pre-production, we were not planning on setting it in the pandemic didn't come until, March. And for at least the first 3 or 4 months after that, leading up until, it was probably only about 3 or 4 weeks before we shot, that we were going through all these COVID safety measures. And this was a film that had always had at least didn't require, a ridiculous amount of extras, but was always something that was going to be extras intensive. It was required to have them for the plot. And, you can do as many safety measures off screen as possible, but there's no way, if a whole room of people have to take off their masks when you start rolling, there's nothing you can really do there if that's built into the story. And so one of the biggest things we realized we could do for the story was for safety was to set it in the pandemic. And at first I was really, I went back and forth for a while with that idea in my head. And what I realized and what I think is very beneficial for people in general to think about their ideas right now is COVID could add a really interesting layer to the environment that we're talking about. It was very important to me that this setting was a rural high school, and specifically in our modern times, I have a lot of stuff that is kind of very subtly dealing with the political atmosphere that we are in the background. And, you know, COVID has obviously, especially in relation to school systems, been a very political topic. And so we decided to set it in the pandemic, and at the start of this school year that we're in, a rural high school that decided to have classes in person, and you know, just started thinking about the minutia of what failings they would have, and you know, how they would mishandle the COVID situation, while also allowing us to have that general safety net of having everyone wear masks on screen, having everyone be spread out. We're still able to do those things, but incorporate it into the story in a way that adds this very interesting layer of subtext. So I ended up being incredibly happy with doing that. And one of the wildest things, and I'm sure this will change if people watch it in 4 or 5 years, but I've been showing a rough cut that we have to several people that have had not coming into it cold, and they don't even notice the COVID elements, because I didn't change anything plot wise. It really is just a background element. And it's such a funny thing to like get to the end and I ask them like what they thought of the COVID element. And they were like, yeah, I wasn't even really processing that, because we're so used to it now, you know. And that's something I think also don't take for granted, is people are just used to to seeing things that way. It's almost more shocking to see people hug on screen and to see people, large groups without masks on, I think, right now. So, and obviously that's unique to this moment, but I think it's something that will honestly just make the film interesting. If you watch it in 5 years, it'll be genuinely just a marker of the time that it was made in, which I think is definitely something for people to think about.
Right.
With their own projects.
That's interesting to treat the rest of the story world as though it just exists normally within this highly unusual world we live in. I think that's an interesting approach. Yeah, we'll see how time tells, you know. We'll look back on this, but it's, you know, it's such a colossally historic moment.
For sure. And I think on that, one other thing I'll say is that you know, so much of life, I think it's important to think of how much of life is the same. Obviously, things are incredibly different, but at the end of the day, a lot of our social interactions are the same kind of interactions that have been happening prior to COVID. So I think it's really something to think about. Like, genuinely, a lot of stories can happen now, and I think people get this idea that we're, you know, in the apocalypse, and that totally takes away from whatever the story is about. But I think I really do, and this is not something I thought at the beginning of this project, it's something I've learned throughout it, is I really think, you know, any sort of regular story, 90% of them could probably be set in the pandemic, and just finding where that subtext fits in a natural way, I think, is important. But, you know, a lot of life doesn't change in the pandemic. A lot of life is still the same. A lot of our social interactions are still the same.
Thank you. So I'll just remind everyone, you can always use the chat if you want to drop a question, but I want to turn to your two co-producers and hear from them for a moment. So at what stage did you sign on to this project? I'd like to hear from each of you. And then, you know, when you started to, you know, producers have a huge role in COVID planning. So what were just like your initial thoughts or concerns or fears, or, you know, you're also on the cutting edge of something. So there is also some excitement there. But what were your initial, like, what were some of the initial thoughts you were going through your head as you signed on to produce this film? And we can start with either Patrick or Natalie.
Patrick, do you want to go first or should I?
It's up to you. I could go if you don't have anything yet. Okay. Yeah, both, like Lincoln said, Natalie and I both came on way early. Like there wasn't even a script yet. Lincoln just kind of had a pitch, and having, you know, worked with him before, we signed on like from the ground up. And so obviously it was not going to be a COVID film originally. So it became challenging as, like, in March, everything kind of shut down, but we were still in that, you know, that baby mindset where we were like, oh, it'll be gone by like June. So we just delay like a month. I think we were going to shoot after, what was it, like Memorial Day was the original shooting date. And so then we delayed it like a month into June. So we're like, that'll be plenty of time. Everything will be fine by then. And then like closer to that, probably in the beginning of May, we realized it was going to go on longer and would probably play a huge impact into the production. So then we settled on August, and then we even had a date after August, I believe. I think end of September was like a backup. And a lot of it was just monitoring the global situation, you know, paying attention to the state and national guidelines. One thing that, like, the films this fall, we're in, I don't know what stage we're in, but that was like pretty scary, was even being allowed to have enough people that we would need to get it done. That would probably have been the biggest thing to have compromised the film, was it had like a scale that we'd been working at for a certain amount of time with the number of extras, it being set in a school, us needing a certain amount of crew, that if we could only have a certain amount of people, that would have been hard. So I think if COVID had existed when, you know, the script was still being developed, that definitely would have been something to address, like the locations or just the scale. Smaller crew not meaning bad, but just meaning approaching it from a different angle. So it would have been nice to know going in, but I think it was a good, like, kind of growing challenge to see the story evolve. And I don't think it was scared us at first, but once we stopped like fighting it and like went with, all right, compromise has to happen, so it's going to happen, and elevate the film in the process, like how's that going to work? And I think finally agreeing and embracing that was what really like made it seem like a normal film.
Good. Thanks, Patrick. Yeah, I think that's a key point, is like at some point you stop trying to swim against the current, right? And I think that's an important lesson we can all take, is to embrace the disruption and find creativity within those restrictions, right? Did we lose Natalie, or?
Yeah, I just looked for her. I think we might have lost her.
Oh, bummer. Okay.
She didn't like my answer.
She can't be associated with you. No, I'm just kidding. So one thing I was wondering, and I maybe we can look at a clip in just a second here, but like, let's just talk for a minute, since we've got actors in the room from Acting for the Camera class. Can we just talk for a second about casting? And just to clarify, so your actors were masked the entire shoot?
So not for the entire shoot. Essentially, pretty much every crowd scene, they were totally masked. Pretty much just interactions between, there's, I think, only 3 characters in the film, the 2 leads and then 1 additional character that would interact with each other without masks on. And that was only for a couple scenes. And all 3 of those people had been tested very recently before coming on. So what, as far as those scenes and playing around with it, I think masks for for me, they, as a director, they honestly offered a very interesting costume piece. And I think there's a very interesting dynamic of when people keep on their masks, when people have them on, that we've started to see evolve between like how comfortable a character is with someone else, and you know, when if they're frustrated, are they taking it off to talk, and what kind of person wears what kind of mask. So there was a lot of thinking about that. The overall safety precaution of setting it in the pandemic was more for these larger scenes with a lot of extras. I think the more you can have masks on, the better in general. But it did offer, it was kind of interesting to have, it was, I would say it's probably half and half the scenes that our leads have masks on. And obviously in all the school scenes, they are supposed to have them on. So it's an interesting thing when they take them off and they're doing something that they're not supposed to do. But like I said, I think for safety's sake, as many scenes as possible as you can have them on is best. But I think if are very stringent on the testing, because I know the big thing with the Safe Way Forward plan that SAG and IATSE and all of them have put forward is largely based on very, very stringent testing. That was the big thing, is making sure we were limiting the amount of people that had to take them off. As far as other things with actors though, and you mentioned casting, so I guess I'll work back from the beginning there. Casting, we did all of our auditions over Zoom, which was definitely a learning experience, especially because I have not really done auditioning processes before this. I have a lot of actor friends that I often cast, but I knew I wanted to find someone new for this role, and I'm so glad I did, because I'm absolutely in love with our actor that ended up playing the lead role of Emmanuel. But it was definitely a unique process. I think it's very valuable to have a casting director. Lauren Maiden, if anyone knows Lauren Maiden, was our casting director, and she did a fantastic job of organizing all of the Zoom calls and emails with all of our potential actors. We did it through Backstage, so she did a great job of organizing it. And so we had all these, essentially I think it was 4 or 5 days by the end of it, of Zoom auditions. We probably auditioned 60, 70 people for a variety of roles. I think it was like 5 or 6 different roles. And then for our lead role, I knew I really needed to know what their in-person chemistry was going to be like. And so we did have 1 day of callbacks, but we did it at a park, Meadowood Regional Park, which ended up being a great place, and I'll get to that in a second. But we did these auditions in a park where we could space the actors. These were callbacks, sorry, where we had only, I think, 6 actors come in, and we had already cast our other lead, Judith, so we just had her come in and read against these, I think, 6 different guys that were trying out for our main character, and had them spread apart, had them distance from us. I think we let them take their masks off right before doing it if they were comfortable. But like I said, they were spread out and we were outside. So that worked well. And then once we had cast, we continued to use that park actually to keep everything outdoors. And I would meet up with my actors, just me and the 2 of them, or my 2 leads. I didn't meet up with any of the other actors. And we met 3, 4 times at this park, where we could just sit in a pavilion and kind of spread out on ends of the pavilion, talk through the roles, and then work. And I think it was very helpful. I think the less you can meet in person, the better. But I think with actors, there is a level that it is can be really, really helpful to develop your relationship with them in person, because I think it almost can aid safety on set, because you know the type of person they are, especially if it's someone that you're if they had been like total not compliant with wearing masks and stuff, that would be a good time to find out then. Luckily they were great with it, but I think it's sometimes better to find out those kind of personality things before getting on a larger set with more people. Yeah, so that was the rehearsal process. And then we really just tried to limit on set that those two actors could be generally just removed from as many other people as possible, because they would interact some during the actual scenes. But I think thinking of the set as groups, which I'm sure Natalie and Patrick can talk a lot more in depth about their planning with that in relation to crew, but that was something I had thought about with actors as well, is keeping them separated. And yeah, so sorry, that kind of went all over the place, but that's more or less.
I see John dropped in a question, and actually I want to add an addendum to that question. So John asks, did the use of masks affect the emotion of the characters in the film? And then I want to maybe spin it to Isabelle for a moment, and maybe Isabelle, you could think after whoever answers that first part, what are the production sound implications of a masked actor on set regarding getting clean dialogue or whatever? So think about that. But do you mind addressing John's question first? Someone on the team?
Sure, I can probably do that. So yeah, it was something I was very worried about at first, because obviously your face is the main thing, your main instrument if you're an actor. And I am very much someone who likes very natural performances. I don't like for things to be overplayed. But luckily, I think, and this goes really into casting, I had actors that were fantastic with their eyes. And if I were to go back in the process, actually, because when we auditioned, we didn't actually know that we were going to set the film in the pandemic. If I were going to go back, I'd probably have them audition with a mask on. I think that's would have been a really helpful thing. That would have made me feel more secure about that fact. I will say, don't worry an incredible amount, because I think a lot of great actors are so much of it's up there and not down here. I think a lot of the moments that it was natural for them to not have their masks on, or for them to pull them down, were some of the more emotionally potent parts of the film. And that just kind of worked out with the story, the way, like, logistically it kind of made sense. So there's definitely times where it was nice to see their whole face. And I think there is something to be said about limiting those amounts of time. So if you really if you were going to pack a punch into a moment, and it makes sense that would be the moment that they don't have their mask on, I think that can almost sometimes be a more emotional moment, because it's like, I haven't been seeing their face for the past 5 minutes. Now I'm seeing their face, and you get this whole other layer to it. So I won't lie that it does mask part of their emotion, but I think I wouldn't be quite as worried about it as I was at the start, at least, because I was very afraid that we would lose a lot with that, and they still gave plenty of performance.
That's interesting. Yeah. So, and I'll be interested to see where. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, it's okay. I was just gonna say, what I would add, directed at the actors in this class, is that I think most of us in our everyday lives, when we're using our masks, like walking out and about at a grocery store or walking around work, a lot of us have already found that we're using our eyes a lot more to communicate what we're feeling or what we're thinking. So to the actors, like, I wouldn't try to like overcompensate in the use of your eyes. I think we have all gathered like a little bit of extra strength in our eyes as communicators already. So I would say, don't worry about the mask. Like, I'm sure it'll come across. You don't want to start overacting with your eyes, because overacting is already a thing. So I would say, don't worry about the mask. Just act as you normally would, and just let your director let you know if it's not coming across, but I'm sure it will.
I totally agree with that. Yeah.
And I'm glad that the word, instrument is also used, because your voice, your eyes, those are instruments. Your body is your instrument. So really good. Okay, Isabel, do you remember my question?
Yeah.
Finally gotten back to you. Okay, so what are the implications sound-wise for masks?
So we were actually filming some stuff here in the cage earlier this week and things like that, and we had some dialogue going on, and of course everybody is wearing a mask, even the person on camera. And the way I was able to get clear audio was using a lav, so a lavalier microphone, and really just kind of practicing it normally how I would. So all of the techniques that I would use normally on an unmasked person, just kind of doing that on masked persons. Maybe try and put it a little bit closer, so like hide it underneath this part of the shirt, or if they're wearing a button-up shirt, inside the button-up. But for me, it didn't really pose that big of an issue. The only reason I can see it being a huge issue would be if you were booming from kind of farther away, things like that. Things might tend to sound a little more muffled. But I think the use of lavs can really come in handy with that type of stuff, because you are able to get it in such close proximity of the sound source.
That's interesting, because we've actually been more concerned about the use of lavaliers, because it requires someone to get within.
Right, that is also the other problem.
Yeah. So, but anyways, thank you for that. And then like I presume ADR.
Yes. Yeah.
Cinch, right?
Yeah.
I will say I had to edit that video that Isabel's talking about, and it made it a breeze for a couple parts where I glitched up and was able to just loop my voice back in from a separate part. So yeah, ADR will definitely be helpful.
Yeah.
Actually, real quick while we got Isabel, can you just talk about lavalier safety? If students were to choose to use lavaliers, what sort of concerns do you have about them?
So yeah, I think when we were using them here in the production labs, I had you lav yourself up, because I didn't want to be that close to you and be like touching your clothes and things like that. So I think that was a good thing for us to do, but actors don't know how to set their own lavs, and they don't know how they're supposed to be hidden and things like that. So in the event that you have to use lavs and you have to lav your actor up and be in close proximity with them like that, obviously sanitizing right before you put your lavs on, sanitizing the microphones, and then after usage, quarantining them for a couple of days, or either sanitizing them that way. And also like things that are easy to do, if you're saving battery on your microphone, and you can just have your actors turn them off and on by themselves. It's not very hard. They just press a button, and things like that. But I think the biggest concern with lavs is that they're on somebody. So you need to just be careful and be aware of where the placement is and things like that.
Yeah, absolutely. I wanted to add to that it's just in talking with a couple industry folk, absolutely no lavs are ever shared between people while you're on set. So if one lav gets assigned to somebody, ideally you let them hold on to it, and if you can't, you take it back from them at the end of the day, keep it in a separate Ziploc bag with their name on it, and it's never, ever, ever shared between other people during the duration of production, because typically you're going to be using it every day. If you ever need to swap it between people, they just literally can't be sanitized by virtue of the way they work. So having to set them aside for a couple of days at a time, just to let them naturally be quarantined before they can go back out on set. So for your all's Film 2 and Film 3 productions, it's highly likely that we will not be able to provide you lavs, so we have to be mindful of that and being prepared for other boom techniques or other sound options. So you may want to get creative in terms of planting a Zoom H4n on set, or finding ways to accommodate sound that will be safe for everybody.
Thanks, Mark. Okay, real quick, Lincoln, and then I'm going to get a question to Sage here. Annalise wrote, curious about how you managed the Zoom auditions when you hosted them. Did you let people in? Did you keep them in waiting rooms? Like, just a real quick answer, if you don't mind.
Yeah. Yeah, we had them all scheduled out for different times that Lauren had scheduled them through emails through the backstage, and then I think there were 15-minute sections, and we would have like 5 or 10 minutes between each audition. I think it was like 5 minutes between each audition where we would talk about it, and then go on to the next person. And I think it was just a
we just had like a Skype meeting, and so we would just send them the link, and we would send it to them right before they were supposed to come. And so they would just come, and they would just leave when they were done. So we didn't keep them in waiting rooms, but nobody was going to stick around after their audition, so it was fine.
Mm-hmm. Did you accept self-taped auditions, or was it always live over Skype or Zoom or whatever?
We encourage not having self-tape auditions, but it's very funny because the one self-tape audition that we did get, or we got two, and I called back both of those, and one of them ended up being the actor we cast, funny enough, so for the lead. So I think you can get a lot from self-tape auditions, but it's definitely nice to interact with people and do adjustments, because I would always give them adjustments for things. Yeah.
So for the actors in the room, backstage is a platform that's come up multiple times. So that should be something in the back of your head as you think about a career in acting, highly used by the industry. And then being able to self-tape or do a live audition are two different skills, as you're finding, and both are valuable and going to be utilized differently in different productions. Okay, Sage, so you've also been working at Charm Cine Camera, so I wanted to ask a little bit about if you have advice. Some students supplement what equipment they check out from us, the EMF department, with rentals of equipment. Do you have any advice on like how to, are there any changes in protocol with COVID, or, what should be in a student's mind if they are thinking about making a rental from like a rental house, whether it be Charm Cine or Serious Grip or whatever? Do you have any advice for us on that?
My advice would be just plan in advance as you can, because the earlier you let me know that you need something, the easier I can get it to you, and then we can plan out like, oh, if you need to come in and you need to prep gear, like we can have that set up for you, sanitized, just let me know everything in advance, or let everybody there know what you need, and just do your research on the gear that you want to rent, so when you come in, you can minimize the time that you're in, that public space.
Thank you. Yeah, there's always some amount of time of like testing to make sure the equipment is functional and it's going to serve you the way you expect it to, right? So we try to limit that as much as possible in the facility.
And the more that you know the gear, based off of videos, the less that I have to come in and like be touching stuff and helping you learn stuff. So.
Cool.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you.
Can I just add to that for a second? Just on behalf of like Serious Grip and stuff as well, and just in general. Hi, I'm Professor Burchiek as well. When you're doing anything in terms of load in and load out, paying attention to social distancing while you're doing that. And also, if you're coming to a rental house, that isn't necessarily the time to also try to like pack your car with as many people as possible. Rental houses don't want a large group of people coming either. So like at Serious Grip, they've stripped down to pretty much just the manager, Ryan Gallo, doing phones and load-ins and load-outs. And so just being really respectful of their safety when you go to the rental house as well. Chances are it should just be one person with the car loaded, backing it up into the carport, and then just maintaining social distance with that employee. Just keeping that in mind during that process too.
Thank you. Okay, I see we got another question in chat. also from Professor Burchiek here. Let's pose this, and then I think it would be time after that to look at a little bit of footage so we can get a little more context here. So, maybe Natalie, Patrick, and Lincoln, you can all, or one of you or multiple of you, speak on location scouting safety. Was any of that virtual, or did you visit locations? What were your locations as well? I mean, it sounds like there was a school and some,
Yeah.
what was the ratio of exterior to interior? Tell us a little bit about scouting and securing locations.
And if you want to dive in a little bit into prepping the locations for day of as well, I think they could kind of be like a two-parter that I think your peers would really learn a lot from.
So what Patrick and I did was we would be on the phone together. We had a list of locations we needed, some of which were really hard to get, especially at the school, because every school was shut down. And so we would go on Google Maps and we would just like look around, and we'd like plop our little person down on Google Earth and like look around the area. And we just would create these lists of locations to find, and at some point you do need to go see those places. So then what we would do is we would, Lincoln, Patrick, and I, and at one point Seth, who is our cinematographer, we would go out together and go check out the place. We'd have masks on while we were at these places for the most part. All of these places, this was like in the thick of COVID, so like there were hardly people at these places, which was kind of nice. And so then when we got to those places, I think it was sort of like Seth and Lincoln would be paying attention to how can this place serve the story, but then Patrick and I would often have conversations about, like, is there enough room for people to spread out here? Is there like a designated place that we can put crafty to where there's enough room to where people can spread out as they eat? So we were thinking about things like that while they were focusing on the image and the quality of the film. And then I'll have Patrick talk about like how we set up when we got to those locations.
Yeah, on the day of, like Natalie said, an important part was controlling people, especially on student sets. I've been a lot of student sets where it's like there's an address on the call sheet and you just kind of show up, and it's a lot of people wandering around looking for the entrance or someone in charge. And for this, we were really strict about like the check-in before you do anything, before you talk to anyone, touch anything, whatever, getting checked in. So each place had a prominent outdoor location that we can, like Lincoln's saying, he can screen share the map. So for example, the first one, we filmed at Fort Frederick State Park, which was a difficult location to get, mainly because this was their first time dealing with anything COVID. So it was a lot of balancing communication back and forth from people, but being able to really be clear with them too, because they want to know exactly where you are, and probably most locations representatives will. So we had obviously very strict markings on like where to show up, and our parking and like area where people could spread out and have meals was separate from the set. Part of that was by request of the park, just because it was technically an active park on the day that we were filming, even though there weren't many people there. But we set up one of those pop-up tents by behind my car. So on the call sheet it said, hey, look for the pop-up tent. So everyone would come there. We had a table, and they would kind of stay outside the tent, come in, they fill out a form, we take their temperature, and then we log everything. And then once they're released, they've essentially already been in communication with like their department heads, so they kind of know where to go. And we were really strict, even on like gear, that like load-ins, load-outs, anytime, like only the people in that department would touch that stuff. So it wasn't like a frantic, like everybody's unloading the car or stuff like that. People kind of already knew what they're doing, which is honestly like a policy that if you have that luxury of knowing your crew in advance and being, in communication, is helpful even outside of COVID. So there wasn't a lot of milling around. There wasn't a lot of like trying to figure out, waiting on someone. And we wanted to keep people like apart in groups and like moving towards like a combined objective. And I guess the indoor, I don't think we have any of the stuff from indoor locations. We didn't really have maps, but the 2 of the days were outside. We filmed the second day at Towson in a parking lot. And so that was the same deal. Come to the tent, get checked in. We did film inside of a gym that day. So we had like really clear markings. Fortunately, you know, the school already had a lot of its signage up. So it was kind of like follow what's already there, as far as like some doors are one way, or places you can go and can't go. But then for the last day, we weren't in like a real school. We were in like a common room in the basement of a church in Frederick. So it was a large room, and it had large lobbies. And then it also had a large courtyard area that people could wait. So like when extras would show up, there was a lot of space where they could be spread out and they could get their food and like eat outside away from everyone. And so that the same thing was being really clear in like our call sheets and all of our communication. When you show up, don't go inside without finding the tent. It's around back, like all that stuff. Really just being as clear as possible. Like no one wants to be guessing anytime on a set. But especially not when there's like really strict safety policies.
Yeah, and to elaborate, what the COVID check-in was they would come to the tent, they'd get their temperature taken with a contactless thermometer, and they would have to fill out a health questionnaire, which I think Lincoln can pull up. And on that
I'll screen share that right now.
On that health questionnaire, it just asked a lot of different questions about, like, have you traveled outside of your regular routine? Have you been diagnosed with COVID? Have you shown symptoms? All that kind of stuff. And this was to like help protect us as students who don't want to be in trouble later if anything bad happens, honestly. But also to protect everyone, because I know that I wouldn't feel safe if I didn't have to, or if everyone didn't have to fill out something like this. And at the bottom, we would write down their temperature, and we would sign, like, whoever the production member was that checked them in would have to initial, just to keep everybody accountable. Everybody had to do this. And the only other thing that we did as far as setting up was we scattered everybody's call time so that not everybody showed up at once. I think it was about a 10-minute to 15-minute difference between departments. And we were really logical about who was called first. So like whichever department had the most setup to do, they'd be called first. Whichever had the least setup to do, they'd be called last. And that was super beneficial. And then that also helped at the breakfast table that we had every morning, where somebody was there to serve the food. You couldn't just grab your food unless it was like individually packaged and spread out. And so that way, like one day I was the one at the breakfast table serving the food. It helped so that I never had more than one person at the table at a time, because everybody was showing up at such different times.
Hey, if I can chime in just really quickly, just let anybody in Film 2 and Film 3 this semester know, we will be providing a form similar to what Lincoln just shared. And we will be giving you to check out for your week-long checkouts, contactless thermometers as well. So you will be provided those things. And Jenna pointed out, and I want to point out also, Lincoln's production was lucky enough to shoot on campus. There is no filming on campus this semester, especially indoors. If there's something outdoors, we can definitely look into it. But anything indoors has since then been completely canceled for the semester. So I just wanted to chime in really quickly with those two things.
Yeah, we got lucky. It was like 2 weeks after that everything kind of fell through with on-campus stuff. Yeah, we got very lucky with that.
I also want to add to the notion of doing a regular health check-in on set is also a pretty critical step in the idea of contact tracing. So let's say the worst happens. You can use that information alongside your call sheets to begin looking at the network of where that spread potential is. So you can use all that information and work backwards and see, okay, if anybody was exposed, let's look at the network of exposure and do our contact tracing diligently.
The other thing too that I would add is that the reason you're doing this, like don't just do it just to do it. Like it is to protect everybody and to protect yourself, because we actually had a really it was kind of scary situation where the reason you want to be so careful is that in the event that somebody does come up with symptoms, you want to make sure you did everything that you can do so that if somebody is to come up with symptoms, especially in the middle of your shoot, you know that it's still safe to like continue as normal. So we did have a situation where somebody ended up calling us the day after they were they were there. They were supposed to show up to set that day, and he let us know that he had like the sniffles. We didn't know what that was, but he really wanted to take it super seriously. He didn't want to risk having COVID and passing it on to anybody else. He was outside all day. He was even under a tree that day. So we considered the fact that it might have just been allergies, but we wanted to respect him and respect everybody else on set by treating it as though it were COVID and just saying, stay home that day. He was actually supposed to be in the film that day, but we had to put everybody's safety first. We knew that the day before he stayed as far as everybody else as he could that day. So we felt like we were in a comfortable enough spot to continue. And we just had to like quickly adapt and write him out of the rest of the film, and it worked out totally fine. But it was only because like we were so strict those first 2 days about all of these COVID restrictions, and we were so adamant with everybody about staying apart from each other that we could make that decision to continue filming. And had we not, none of us would have felt like it were morally correct to continue. And luckily, he never ended up having COVID. He was totally fine. I think it was just allergies, but it was still good that we treated it as seriously as we did.
I'm glad you hit on that, because it kind of points to, you know, the word strict, right? And I like to say this in my classes, is a film set is not a fun playground environment, right? It's business. You're going to work, right? It's an industry. So you show up and you go to work. And so I think keeping that professional distance, this was also nicely parallels with like Chelsea Pace visiting last week and desexualizing the film set. And so it's just always points to professionalism. And I think as filmmakers, as actors, you know, you feel a certain pressure sometimes to like not say anything if you feel a little off, you know, if you feel sick. You know, and this is part of like this American work culture that like, you know, you swallow it and you know, you show up to work even though you're symptomatic in some way. We really have to dispel that notion, and report and be responsible and check your temperature every morning, and those kinds of things are really valuable. It's a cultural shift we need to embrace. Lincoln, you got your hand up there.
Yeah, I just want to say, I know we're getting short on time, but I really wanted to make sure, I think one of the things Natalie and Patrick did that was really amazing was the actual COVID safety plan that they made. And I'd love to screen share that. They've talked about a lot of things on it, but there's a couple things I don't think they've covered. And I'd love to have them talk about that.
You gotta make sure to look at some of your work, so.
Yeah, we can kind of go through this really quick. I just want to, I think that's something that they did really, really well. And do you think we have time to share that?
Yeah, let's go ahead and set it real quick. We're not going to read it line by line.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, so this is the document. Natalie or Patrick, do you want to elaborate on anything in here?
The food one was a big one for us. I know we didn't really talk about food other than the breakfast table. We did have, so Lincoln's parents and then my mom were like the two different like catering companies that did food for us. And so they like were held, even though, you know, they were family of ours, they were held to the same standards as us. So everything was prepared, you know, under clean conditions. Everything was individually packaged. So it wasn't, you know, like bowls of food or, you know, like the normal set where you might get like a veggie tray or something like that. Everything was packaged in like the communication beforehand. There's, you know, like the options, like if you had any dietary restrictions or if you were vegetarian, vegan, etc. They could make what was necessary there. And then there was some extra, but it was, again, keeping it like really clear to everyone about rules for that. That was incorporated. Normally, I don't think we would have incorporated, you know, how lunch works into our safety meeting at the beginning of the day from the AD, but like that had as much, you know, time covered over it as it was, you know, unloading and doing the actual work, because obviously people want to be fed as compensation on these student sets, but they want to be safe doing it too. I think even like they had their own little policies, like Lincoln's mom came up with like a policy with the tent, you know, like they wait outside the tent while they prepare the plate for them, and then they come in just to take the plate. So they're not even near the table with the food. So again, being really clear, writing this stuff down was like really helpful because juggling it all around or just saying it verbally, things can get lost. So having this that we could show people was like a great way to have everything, all your bases covered, preparing for the worst, but optimistically hoping for the best.
Can you,
This was sent out with our call. I don't know if this was mentioned, but this was sent out with our call sheet every day, and it was super beneficial when it came to getting locations, because showing them a document like this about what our plan was to keep things safe added legitimacy to us. We felt oftentimes we were often scared about coming across as like socially irresponsible by asking these places to film on their premises. Like, we didn't want to come off like we weren't taking COVID seriously by filming in the middle of summer. So we sent this to them. That way they knew that they could trust us to use their space and that nothing could fall back on them. And then this was also super helpful for actors who were really precautious about filming during this time. We had a few people who were would email us saying like, I'm really worried about being on this set. Like, what are you guys doing to keep us safe? And you just had to send them this document, and then they were good to go.
I'm so glad you shared that, Natalie, because I think one thing that might be really helpful to remember is to be completely transparent with every single person that helps out on your film. And having these documents done in advance helps you not have to have these conversations on the day. And so every actor, even if you have an additional, I know you're supposed to keep your cast and crew under 10 people, but if you have an extra PA helping that day, don't psychologically just go, oh, it's just a PA, whatever, they're not here for the whole production, it doesn't matter. Every single person that steps foot on your set should have this information before that day begins. So with like more than 24 hours in advance, having this transparency, like Natalie said, for your location, but as well as every single person involved. You might even want to have some of this stuff ready to go when you do your casting, so the actors know that they're going to be safe on set with you in the pre-production process. You're writing COVID into every step. I think it would be really helpful for you all.
Sure.
all right, let's look at something, huh? Let's
Okay.
do it up.
Yeah, I got a scene I can show real quick. This is actually towards the end of the film, but it doesn't really contain any spoilers, and it's a section I really like. So, yeah, this is a scene from Monochromacy. Can everyone see that all right?
Yes.
Cool. Hopefully it plays okay.
What MLA stands for. I know you guys know one. Modern Language Association. And it was created as a means for researchers and students and anyone in the literature field to write in a uniform way. Now, MLA is not only used in literature, right? Right? Other fields have actually adopted the format as well. Okay, guys. We know this, so let's hop into some specifics. Ahem. So we're gonna use 8.5 by 11 margins, right? We're gonna do 1-inch margins at the top, bottom, indent set off locations, 1-inch margins. Use any type of font that is easier.
Can I go to the bathroom?
An example is Times New Roman, and don't forget, 12 point font.
I'm sorry.
It's fine. You don't have
I want to make it up to you.
you don't have to make it up to me.
Here you go. You said you wanted it.
I don't want it anymore. Just get it the fuck out of here. We're in fucking school. Get the fuck out of here.
And that's where I'm going to pause that one because then it gets into spoilery territory. Thank you. Yeah, sorry, I didn't really give any context for that scene, but he is trying to apologize for something, and she does not want his apology. Yeah, I wish I realized halfway through it that I should have shown an edited sequence because Natalie did a fantastic job editing it. But I really like that scene a lot. So
See a long take. I know you guys like. Was that a zoom lens?
yeah. That's one. Oh, sorry.
Well, I want to hear about lenses because that can do a lot for subject separation.
For sure. For sure. That was a lot of conversations I had with my DP, Seth. And luckily, it had been very much in my creative vision from the start that we would shoot almost everything telephoto. And I love zooms. I'm a huge fan of zoom lenses. And so luckily that worked out really well when we got into the COVID stuff. And it's like, we're already planning on shooting everything telephoto. Let's just make sure we're really strict about that. And so we were able to stay very distant from our actors as far as the camera itself. And luckily that's something I already wanted. But I think if you can make it logistically, or if you can find a story-based reason to go with telephoto lenses, now is definitely the time to do it, because it is handy to be able to remove yourself from the actors. And I mean, I love zoom lenses, so if you're into that as well, that's great. Yeah.
So we're at the hour mark, Joe. I didn't want to get into your class this time, but
I don't mind if this goes a tiny bit longer. I want to make sure we have time for other general questions from folks. If somebody wants to chime in, they can unmute themselves.
I have something I would like to touch on. I don't want to take away from a student, but I would love to just, if we have time, have you do a quick run through of what the safety meeting really looked like, because we keep mentioning these words, safety meeting, and they're very specific to each day, and there may be some students in here that have never been a part of a safety meeting before, and so just to do like a little mock one may be helpful for students to really understand the rundown when they're on set.
Yeah. I can do that if you guys want. I actually AD'd a film prior to this, which was a great experience for getting ready. That was a lot of stress, but I'm very familiar with how safety meetings should kind of operate. And the biggest thing is you want to communicate everything. I think that's the most important thing to always remember. The safety meeting is the time to make sure you have said everything that people need to have heard safety wise. Like, there should not be any kind of thing that you're letting a department head, leaving the department head's responsibility to say to that person. I think it's very important to have one person give the safety meeting. I know you guys are restricted to 10-person sets, but someone should definitely be in that kind of operating, at least in part, as an assistant director, because that is really, really crucial to safety. We had a great assistant director, Laura Guidi. And but so in the safety meeting, we'd go through pretty much everything that Natalie and Patrick had outlined in the COVID safety plan. Also going over the schedule for the day is a really good thing to do, so people know where they need to be at different times, and the breakout of where different departments should be. And yeah, so you want to not only go over COVID safety, but you also want to keep in mind, safety meetings have been a thing for a while. They are very, very important for any other kind of safety, whether that be, there's a scene with choreography, or we have a location that has some kind of, floorboards that are not secure or something like that. Or even, and you should also even cover things that, like we talked about the other week, that the intimacy coordinator was talking about, just like making sure that there is what kind of language can be used on this set. Obviously, we were dealing with subject matter that involved the neurodivergent community, and So it was very, very crucial. She always, Laura would always give a disclaimer that, you know, we have a very, very strict policy about handling that kind of material safely, as well as making sure, you know, zero tolerance for sexual assault or for sexual misconduct of any kind. So, and also outlining who to report those kinds of things to, and giving a couple different people, I think is really helpful, so that if people feel more comfortable with someone else. And there's been things where we've talked about the shop steward position before in other EMF stuff. And I think that's important to a really good thing to outline someone as that as well. But sorry, that was kind of all over the place. It's good to come into those with a very, you should always write out your bullet points before it. That's something I found when ADing. If I don't write out all my bullet points, I will miss something. And I think it's especially important in COVID times to just be ready to adapt it up until the moment you shoot. You get on location and you might find out something in those 10 minutes before you have the safety meeting. And it's a good thing to have like a good 20, 30 minutes before the start of the day, when you can coordinate and make sure there's nothing else that needs to go in it. But and have it
Our
every day.
locations had a lot of very strict rules related to their normal policy, but also for COVID, that we were often getting like last minute, that it was important to have that time and that flexibility to include.
Mm-hmm.
So don't rush your schedule, right? You can't expect to go in shooting, 30 setups in a day. You need to give yourself time and budget that in, regarding like, one crew department working at a time. And then another thing they identify is something we're going to ask of our students in production, which is to identify a COVID safety set officer. And I don't know if you guys did that with your shoot. It sounds like you had several people deputized to take any kind of safety concerns. But what we're going to ask is that somebody be the point person. Usually we ask that in our circumstance, it's usually the AD or the producer, depending on what student is enrolled in the class. So did you guys have someone with that designation? Was it Laura?
We actually had Wes Brown designated. I know you guys have limits on the number of crew, so that was a luxury that we had. I would recommend like your AD or your producer doing that, but we had Wes as sort of a production manager who he was going around sanitizing commonly used areas, watching for like people with masks. I'll give a shout out to Lincoln's sister made us. We had color coded masks with our producer, like our production head title on them. So that was another way that like Wes visually, like if he saw people in different departments mingling and he knew that they weren't supposed to, he could sort of like kindly break those up, any side conversations, make sure people, have them up. It's really easy, like when you're eating, to like forget to like pull it up or down or whatever. So having him as like an extra pair of eyes was nice. But yeah, absolutely, like your producer or your AD could definitely function in that role too.
Any student questions for the panelists? Annalise, I see your hand up. Go ahead.
Hello. I actually have two questions, but I'll start with my easy question. So I'm directing a film this semester, and I'm kind of like getting my plan ready for like masks on set. And I saw pictures from your guys' set, and I saw the mask. I was curious, Lincoln, if you know where your sister got the masks from. I've been looking around online, but I don't know if there's like a specific place you got bought, because I know like there's mask policies now with the amount of masks like crew has to have.
So she's actually very into arts and crafts, or that sounds odd, so demeaning. No, she's into sewing and stuff like that. And she was very kind, and also had a very boring, I think, COVID summer and a lot of time. So she actually would take material from shirts and stuff, and would, she's in the room next to me, so I'm trying to talk quietly because she'll get annoyed. But she would essentially cut up shirts, and had a design that she had found online where she would essentially sew together the material from different shirts that had the right amount of fabric. And then had a iron, or would essentially press the labels onto them after they were all built. So yeah, she totally made them pretty much from scratch, which was really cool.
That's awesome. Yeah, I like that. And did I guess another question relating to the masks? Did all of your crew members, did they have one mask, or what was your like policy for the masks?
We requested people bring one of their own. Some people like wore these over top of like their normal mask, or
Okay.
if they wanted something like an N95, like something a little bit stronger than a cloth one, they would wear them over top. By the third day, we had some people who, you know, would want to wash them or stuff like that. So there was a little bit of leniency for some people not wearing the like assigned mask, but for the most part, everyone wore them the whole time, or just used their mask that they brought from home if they thought theirs was getting dirty.
People would also, if they were uncomfortable with their mask, some people would put a regular mask on and then wear their the one we had given them on their wrist, so that we still had the color identification that was breaking up the departments. Because that was the other important kind of double thing, is that we could identify what department people were in and that they were separated.
Yeah, I think that's great. I think that would help any PA for the future of filmmaking to be able to read who's in what department, to be honest with you.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Normalize name tags. They're cool.
Yeah.
All right. Looks like someone wants to know what camera. Tony wants to know what camera you shot in. What's the answer there?
It was the Red Gemini. Patrick could probably elaborate more. I'm not a camera person. It was a Fujinon zoom lens on a Red Gemini.
Red Gemini. You got it.
Okay. Yeah.
Sage could probably answer, because I think that was.
Oh yeah, Sage is here.
How many Ks is that one?
Yeah, we helped out Lincoln and his set to get whatever equipment they needed. So
we did pay.
They rented.
They did pay. We had a hefty discount because, you know, we love Towson students over at, you know, Charm City, but they did pay.
Has anyone asked yet how you did set dressing, like how you rotated crews in safely at all, or if you had a COVID plan for that? Because it looks like you did have a fair amount of set dressing on certain parts. And if you answered that already, I'm multitasking, so I apologize.
Natalie or Patrick, do you want to talk? Yeah, there we go.
Yeah, so what we tried to do, and sometimes there would be a bit of overlap in departments being in the same like location, but what we tried to do is schedule out the day so that like art department could go in first or lighting could go in first. We tried to like just keep all the departments separate through really particular scheduling. So yeah, typically the art department could go in first, set dress everything, and then they could be moving on to the next thing before the other departments would arrive. And there were points where I saw like lighting and art department were in the same room setting up at the same time.
Uh-oh.
Somebody finished.
Do you want to pick up where?
Last day where we were on like a really tight schedule. Yeah, Patrick, just pick up where I left off because I'm afraid of my connection right now.
I think we got most of it. The scheduling played into that a lot, in terms of we had plenty of time where like once a department was done with their job, they could start like prepping for future scenes that we were doing like later in the day. So for example, on our second day was probably the easiest for that. We were outside in the beginning of the day and then we moved inside. So there wasn't a lot of art to do outside, but once they'd, you know, taken care of their jobs, they could go in by themselves and have plenty of time. They weren't rushing around and they didn't have other people in them. And then same thing, once they were done, they could go out and take like an early lunch, and then lighting could move in and then go in. And then we, after lighting was done, let art go back in to have, you know, second looks, or if there were conflicts like, oh, we need, you know, lights here and we can't have this, or we need to move stuff, they can have those conversations with plenty of time, not worrying. Obviously that's hard first thing in the day, so that was why we tried to like keep the easiest stuff at the front of the day, so we didn't have a lot of that standing around talking, waiting for stuff at the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Well, I can't thank our panelists enough for being a part of this. Let's give them a round of applause, everyone. If you could, please show your appreciation. This is fantastic. So many resources. I think you paved the good path for us to follow with our productions. So I hope everybody keeps these things in mind. Jenny, you look like you want to add something.
Just if for students that don't know you all, if you wouldn't mind sharing maybe your emails or how they could get in touch with you in the chat in case they come up with a question later, and if you don't mind, that way they could ask you, or maybe throughout their pre-production process they could ask you as another resource. That would be great. Thank you.
Sure.
So for our students, currently, a lot of whom are going to enter into production soon, we're going to have a COVID safety report that's going to have to be filled out prior to you given access to go shoot your films. We'll be sending those out. You need to put in a lot of information about your locations and your protocols and your crew. And so we'll be in touch with that. And then we're also going to have some meetings about reviewing things. So it's really important to have this at the front of your mind as we move into mid-October. The stakes are high, to stay safe and to not let your set become a super spreader event. Without further ado, okay, so let me just say this. So the acting class and the EMF class for directing, we're going to conclude class right now, but for my EMF students, I'll just remind you one more time, I have reading responses due each week. If you didn't get yours in for this week, it's about rehearsals. It's very good information. I'll accept it up to late tonight without any kind of late penalty. And acting students, I think your professor will probably be in touch with you, and we'll resume normal class next week, okay? So, and that's it for me. I'll stay on in case anybody wants to ask me any questions or anything. But again, this has been really valuable, and I hope everybody took away some good insights here. So,
Thank you.
Good luck on the film. I'm really excited for this.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Okay. That's a wrap, folks.